Welcome back to your own Reviews channel, where we review and break down movies in shorter time frame possible. In this video I will review an action thriller movie from year 2008 named Pride and Glory. Please stay with me till this video ends. The scene opens with a football game where the NYPD are playing. Jimmy Egan is the main player and receives instructions from the coach to do everything to maintain their lead. They are up 14-10. He encourages the team, expressing his belief in their abilities. Ray Tierney sits beside Megan Egan and watches the game with Francis Tierney Jr., his brother. They emerge victorious amidst cheers, but the celebration is cut short when Francis Jr. receives news that 4 officers from his division have been killed. Francis Jr. and Ray rush to the scene, finding bodies scattered throughout a shabby apartment. The chaos is evident, with bodies near the door and window. As an officer is carried out on a stretcher, Jimmy arrives from the football game and is overcome with anger and grief at the sight of his fallen comrades. He retreats to a bathroom, where he breaks down in tears, shattering a mirror in his distress. Meanwhile, Francis Sr. is also present, issuing commands as a high-ranking figure in the department, though his exact role remains unclear. In the hospital, Ray and Jimmy are seated together when the officer who was brought in tragically passes away. The sound of the wife's mournful cries fills the air, a testament to the fact that he was a beloved friend to all. Seeking solace, Ray retreats to the bathroom and begins taking some prescribed pills. Just then, Francis Sr. enters and gazes at his son, suggesting that he should consider joining the task force to investigate the murders of the men. Ray expresses his hesitation, but his father disagrees, pointing out that the deceased officer would have done it for him. So why shouldn't Ray? Ray tries to object, recounting a past incident that led him to the missing persons division, but his father remains adamant and ultimately convinces him to join the task force. The scene shifts to the alley where the incident took place. Ray and a fellow task force officer glance up at the window, deducing that the shooter was injured and fled. They trace the trail of blood until it abruptly stops, indicating that the perpetrator must have escaped in a vehicle. However, they lack any further information. As they search the area, they stumble upon a cell phone buried in the snow. They have also been provided with profiles of 6 potential suspects. An officer approaches and asks if anyone speaks Spanish, as there is a child who may have witnessed something. Ray volunteers his limited knowledge of the language, and they enter a nearby convenience store where a man is shouting in Spanish. Ray calmly intervenes and convinces the man to step aside, enlisting the assistance of his wife to communicate with the child. The child is asleep on the sofa and wakes up when Ray enters. Ray questions him and they discover that the shooter was bleeding from his stomach. The child appears frightened and, upon seeing the photos, they learn his name is Angel Tezo. When Ray inquires about the car's color, they are informed it was a white, 4-door cab car, not yellow. Switch to the car, abandoned in a green, non-industrial area. Jimmy, Kenny, Sandy, and Eddie are inspecting the vehicle. It seems that a deal went terribly wrong. They were attempting to eliminate Tezo and retrieve money, but things went awry. Tezo escaped, killed their associates, and took the money. He also killed the driver. They decide to hunt down and eliminate Tezo because he can implicate them all and is aware of their intentions. They discuss drugs, bribes, and hits evidently involving corrupt cops. Initially, they set fire to the car and its contents. Cut to Tezo having a doctor stitch up his stomach wound in a secure location while his associates count the money. Tezo displays a hot temper and berates the doctor frequently. After the doctor finishes, they give him some money, but Tezo's girlfriend hands him a potato. Tezo attaches it to his gun, kisses her, and uses the potato as a makeshift silencer to shoot the doctor. Ray is on his houseboat, examining the crime scene photos when he notices something odd in one of the pictures. One of the deceased men didn't have bootlaces or a belt on, raising questions. After making some calls, he doesn't get much information. On Christmas Day, Ray approaches a townhouse, hesitates to knock, and instead leaves a small gift on the porch. As he walks away, the door opens, revealing Ray's estranged wife. They are on the brink of divorce, facing numerous challenges. Despite their mutual care, she decides to end things, and they part ways sadly. Eddie and Sandy visit a convenience store, evacuate everyone, and intimidate the cashier until he reveals information about Tezo. They give him 24 hours to gather more details, threatening to kill him otherwise. Eddie demonstrates his instability by pointing an empty gun at the cashier's head. They then rob the register and take all the money. In another scene, Francis Jr.'s wife Abby, who appears very ill with a bald head, takes medication while Francis asks if she's up for the party. She insists on attending. Downstairs, preparations are in full swing, with Francis Sr. heavily intoxicated and the kids eager to open gifts. Francis Jr. presents Abby with a ring, promising eternal love, which nearly brings her to tears. The arrival of Jimmy and his family marks the start of the gift-giving festivities. During dinner, Francis Sr. praises Ray and Megan but ignores Francis Jr. and Jimmy, creating an uncomfortable atmosphere. Francis and Jimmy have a private conversation to discuss the situation, but Jimmy doesn't provide much information. Later, there is a shooting at Tezo's house. Francis is worried and uncertain. Police officers find a violent crime scene with multiple victims shot execution style. Ray confronts Tezo's girlfriend, who reveals that Tezo was tipped off by a police officer named Sandy. Despite this valuable information, Ray chooses not to tell the detectives present. Later, a grand funeral is held for the fallen officers, with Francis Jr. as the commanding officer. Ray questions Francis Jr. about Sandy, leading to a heated conversation. Someone knew about the operation. Ray asks Francis Jr. about a nickname, but Francis Jr. denies knowing anyone. They part ways frustrated. Francis Jr. discovers Sandy's involvement in Jimmy's drug dealings and planned executions. Sandy admits it all, thinking Francis Jr. already knew. Shocked, Francis Jr. demands Sandy to surrender his badge and gun and warns him never to return. Sandy is left devastated as Francis Jr. walks away. Meanwhile, Abby, knowing she is dying, watches her children as Francis Jr. sits in his car, upset and unmoving, while his wife tries to console her upstairs. Jimmy and his wife are interrupted by a visitor, Casado, who is upset with Jimmy for not following through on a deal. Jimmy confronts Casado and warns him to stay away from his family. Jimmy assembles his crew to find Tezo's right-hand man, storming into a dinner to extract information. Despite their attempts, the man remains silent. In a desperate move, they threaten his wife and infant, prompting him to reveal Tezo's location. Jimmy returns the unharmed baby and obtains the information. Meanwhile, Ray locates a drug addict who reveals Tezo's whereabouts, which Ray reports. Ray intervenes and declares Tezo is alive, but Jimmy takes Ray's gun and shoots Tezo 3 times. Jimmy tells Ray to lie about the situation, but Ray questions his sanity. Outside the boathouse, Ray tells Francis Jr. the story, feeling distraught and wanting to wash away the blood before going to the boathouse. Francis Jr. is upset but reluctant to share his worries with Abby. Eventually, he confides in her, fearing the consequences of a troubling situation. Abby tries to find a solution, but Francis Jr. believes there is none and worries about his work falling apart. Abby reassures him, expressing her trust in him and urging him to stay strong for their children. Meanwhile, in a newspaper office, news spreads about Tezo's mouth injury and the presence of splinters in his throat. A disheveled Sandy contacts a reporter and reveals that everyone is involved in illegal activities, including murder and drug dealing. Sandy sadly takes his own life before the reporter can expose the truth. During a press conference, the police accuse the deceased officers and Sandy of being vigilantes. Francis Jr. faces his father, who questions his knowledge of the situation. Francis Jr. admits to knowing enough, angering his father. Francis Jr. suggests his father also faced a similar dilemma, but his father denies ever accepting bribes. Francis Jr. reveals he never took money either and leaves his father looking distressed. Ray, buying food, is followed by a reporter who knows of Ray's past lies to protect fellow officers. The reporter desires truth without harming Ray. Angry and upset, Ray walks away. Francis Jr. meets Jimmy in a bar and demands an explanation. Jimmy claims to be following Francis Jr.'s orders to reduce crime but is met with disapproval. Francis Jr. refuses Jimmy's money. Jimmy realizes everything is unraveling and appears distraught. Ray wakes up to a call telling him to give his statement to the IAB. He complies, but is surprised by reporters and protesters when he arrives. Ray maintains respect with the IAB, but won't disclose the identity of Tezo's shooter. Francis Sr. watches a video of Jimmy accusing Ray of murder. Another officer supports Jimmy's claims. Francis Sr. believes Ray is being framed. Ray and Francis Sr. argue about what to do next. Ray refuses to lie again to protect the department. Francis Jr. intervenes and wants to expose corruption. They decide to find Jimmy at a bar called Irish Eyes. Kenny and Eddie are in a car discussing money. Kenny reminds Eddie to lay low, following Jimmy's orders. Eddie argues that he needs money and plans to rob a convenience store. However, Eddie gets shot during the robbery, causing chaos. Kenny mistakenly shoots a man and gang members get involved. Kenny locks himself in the store, but the police block all exits. Desperate, he takes the store owner hostage. Francis Jr. is informed and Ray promises to handle Jimmy. Francis Jr. calmly persuades Kenny to surrender, offering assistance. Francis Sr. receives a call from an officer looking for Ray, but he truthfully says Ray isn't there. The officer asks to enter, but Francis Sr. declines. At the bar, Jimmy is sad and drinks. Ray enters, shows his badge, and tells everyone to leave. Ray and Jimmy put their guns, badges, and handcuffs on the bar to fight. They brawl, knocking over tables and chairs, and end up on a pool table. Ray hits Jimmy with a cue ball. Francis Jr. calms down Kenny and gets him in a car to escape. The neighborhood is angry about the police issues and Tezo's right-hand man is leading the crowd. When Kenny is taken away, the crowd disperses, but remains angry. Ray was taking Jimmy to the standoff location when a crowd, led by Tezo's right-hand man, ambushed them. Jimmy asked Ray to convey his love to his wife. The crowd armed Jimmy with a baseball bat and the other man had a crowbar. Sensing danger, Jimmy dropped the bat, prompting the man to strike him with the crowbar. Ray managed to reach the hostage scene where he encountered Francis Jr. The brothers later arrived at the courthouse, dressed in uniform, and were greeted by reporters. They entered the courthouse, shaking hands with prosecutors and investigators, ready to testify. Thank you for viewing this video. Kindly show your support by giving it a thumbs up, sharing it with your friends, and subscribing to my channel.